This is a deeper listen from KEXP, the show we talk with musicians about the thoughts and experiences that shape their music. I'm Emily Fox. The HBO documentary called Stax Soulsville U.S.A. is nominated for 2 Emmys this year. The Memphis-based label was a big player in getting soul music in the mainstream. Some of the label's hits are Sitting on the Dock of the Bay,
I'm sitting on the dock of the bay,
and Try a Little Tenderness by Otis Redding,
try a little tenderness, yeah.
Green Onions by Booker T and the MGs, I'll Take You There by the Staples Singers,
Let me take you there.
the music theme of Shaft by Isaac Hayes,
Who is the man that would risk his neck for his brother, man?
and Hold On I'm Comin, and Soul Man, co-written by my guest today, David Porter, who was a musician and songwriter at Stax from the very beginning, and he's here to share his version of the Stax story, which also is portrayed in the new documentary. Hello, David.
Hello.
Stax started off as a country label, but then grew into this hit maker for soul music. Talk about those early days at Stax and what it was like there.
The early days had no association with the music that it ultimately became internationally famous for. But the energy there was a new group of people moving into a neighborhood that was changing over in the words of the old days. And there was new neighbors and that kind of thing. And they were doing country music. And I was a young kid who was just getting ready to graduate from high school, and was working at a grocery store across the street, and went over and pestered them about giving me an audition. They ultimately gave me that audition. And with that audition, I bought some of the cornerstones of Stax Records to there. And shortly thereafter, Jim Stewart decided to record African-American music. And that's how Rufus Thomas came to be.
If you don't know how to do it, I'll show you how to walk the dog. Come on now.
Wow. And so you kind of were a big player in switching Stax over to soul music then.
I was the only player.
I love it. I love it.
They were doing country music, and I was just a pestering kid.
And Stax featured both black and white musicians playing together. And, you know, in those early days at Stax, I mean, this was happening in Memphis, which I believe was still segregated at the time. How would you describe the racial dynamics at play in Memphis and at Stax in those early days?
Well, your belief about segregation is quite accurate and on point. It was in the middle of that period in the country, and certainly Memphis was one of the hotbeds for it. But the magic that happened at Stax was the fact that you had aspirations for black talents who really, really wanted to be exceptional in what their goals were, and you had white talents who knew that this music was something special and because of the feelings of it, and the unity and the bond that was created because of that was extremely strong because of the trust and confidence that we all develop in each other. And anyone who came into that environment, be they black or white, would know that if they didn't come with that kind of spirit and desire, they would not be welcome there. Because we recognized that was one of our greatest strengths, the ability to care and also allow yourself to be emotionally vulnerable to the creative process.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, when I was watching the documentary, putting all the pieces together, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was shot and killed in Memphis when Stax was on the rise. What kind of impact did that make on the city and Stax musicians?
Well, it made a tremendous impact on the city because Dr. King was loved in ways that, I found in talking about this, I can't find adequate words to talk about the power and dynamic of what he was contributing, not just to Memphis, but to the world. And so it was just something extremely special. And so that situation put a damper on the city. It made us voice some feelings that we were not voicing. inside of the studio, but we were voicing in the street. So it gave everybody another kind of perspective of some of our feelings about racism at the time. But it did not impact upon 926 East McLemore when we went into the studios. For whatever reason, and sometimes I think about that now, we refused to allow that kind of bigotry and ignorance to get inside of the music and contaminate it at all.
You co-wrote Soul Man, wasn't that written kind of in the aftermath of Dr. Martin Luther King's death? Can you tell me more about the backstory behind the song Soul Man?
Well, actually, there was things going on across the country, and this really may have been before Dr. King was assassinated that we actually wrote the song. But there were things going on in the country, and Isaac had saw an example of what those things were with some of the activities that were happening inside of Detroit. And he was talking about buildings having soul on them, businesses that were Black owned, and people wouldn't damage those or wouldn't react to it in a negative way, even before the assassination. And so he had mentioned that to me and said, why don't we write a song about soul? And the thought was, I said, well, let's write a song and call it Soul Man. And really and truly, at the time, we had no idea rather, that it would have the global impact that it did, because we wrote it in such a way to motivate people that looked like us. And so it was meant to be a motivational kind of thing based on the times and segregation and all those kinds of things. If you listen to it, it talk about humble beginning. It talk about getting an education. It talk about having a pride within yourself that's stronger than the obstacle that you have to deal with. And because of that, you are strong inside of yourself because of your belief in your principles, and you are soul man because of it. And feel is made to feel fun.
So I want to go through a list of some big moments that happened at Stax and get your reaction to them, because there are so many huge moments that happened through this 4-part documentary that I wasn't aware of, and my jaw dropped in many, many spots. One of which is, Otis Redding, who was huge for Stax, died in a plane crash along with other band members on their way to a performance in the Midwest in 1967. And, this was at the height of Otis Redding's career. This is when Stax was on the rise.
Oh, she may be weary. Them young girls, they do get wearied.
What was that like for you and the rest of Stax?
Oh, it was devastating to us. When you are aware of how valuable Otis was in his creative instincts and his motivation in motivating us to feel that there were creative juices inside of us unexplored, and we just had to have the confidence and the mindset to go and get it, because the way Otis created music was not like what we were commonly seeing. And he started all of us getting really, really gung-ho about what is called head arrangements. That is going on the floor inside of a studio and making up the music while you are working with the musicians. You're not writing and playing from any music charts. You put numbers down for the chord progression movements, but you're really making up the parts, arming the parts, playing the parts that you want a bass player to play, or a guitar line that you want a guitar line to play, and you're doing that either humming it or playing it on the piano or whatever. And Otis was amazing at that. Horn arrangements, all of those horn arrangements that you would hear on the Otis Redding records, he would be making those up, and really you're in the studio and you wouldn't know where the song was because he wasn't singing the song. He was giving out musical parts. And so when you guys would play the music parts and then he starts singing a song, it would blow you away. He heard in his head where everything was even before they were done. And we all developed that instinct because of the greatness of Otis Redding. And so for us to lose him, it was like taking some of the lifeblood out of all of us. And he still lived on through us and in us because we use that motivation that he gave to us as well, really one of the cornerstones of the creative processes of Stax Records.
And I also loved like his origin story with Stax, which seems very similar to yours, where you're, working across the street at a grocery store and you come in and you're like, hey, why don't we do this? And
Right.
They agreed. Whereas wasn't Otis was waiting outside during a session day all day, just waiting, for someone to just listen to him sing?
He was a driver for a guy that we were recording.
Oh, he was a driver. Okay,
He was the driver for the guy that we were recording. And so Otis was in the building, but he wasn't getting in the way. The artist that we were recording, that music didn't work well. And so it was a downer because the thoughts that Jim may have had about that artist and the sales pitch that he got from somebody to record that artist, the artist couldn't validate it. But during that period, Otis was on the floor, lying on the floor, sitting on the floor, and looking for an opportunity to encourage someone to take a listen to him. And it happened with Al Jackson Jr. telling Steve Cropper about that. And Steve telling Jim that maybe we ought to take a listen to him. And then the audition happened. And he sang These Arms Are Mine. And it was unbelievable, the gift that he had. And he didn't know that individuality was his greatest strength because he was a huge fan of Little Richard. And if you listen to the B-side of the record, These Arms Are Mine, you'll see that he sounds a lot like Little Richard on the B-side. But when he got into being himself, he sounded like no other one but Otis Redding. And his abilities to do records the way he did was, like I said, the lifeblood of where we ultimately ended up being.
These arms are mine. They are lonely, lonely and fielding blue.
What a roller coaster ride for Stax to go through what you did with, starting off as an independent label and then being acquired by larger labels. First, Atlantic to oversee Stax, and then Atlantic merged and then kind of gobbled up all of Stax's catalog. Stax then had to start completely from kind of scratch again to rebuild your catalog and have control. And then Jim Stewart, who kind of was the original founders of Stax, has stepped down in 1972. Stax then signs under CBS. There were issues there where the person who signed you left, after a few months. And then basically within a few months after that, so many things fell, which kind of led to Stax having to file for bankruptcy, close up shop. I mean, there was so much that happened in a few years there. I mean, can you walk me through some of those issues with being acquired by larger labels, having to rebuild again, and then what happened at the end with Stax? Like, what is your take of all that happened there?
Well, I thought that Jim Stewart made a beautiful point of being open about how he wasn't a business person per se. And the relationship with Atlantic Records was a handshake relationship initially, which it was. We didn't know the business arrangement. I was there during that time as well. That's how Sam and Dave and all the others came to us. And he ended up signing a contract that he didn't read. He told the truth about that in the documentary. And then Atlantic Records knew they were taking advantage of him. And he had signed away the entire catalog of Stax Records on records that we had been recording on other artists. All of that was gone. And that being the case was the reason that we ended up having to start over. We didn't file bankruptcy at the time, but we had to start over because of that. And after that, we had to make our minds up. Al Bell took over leadership position and had a concept of how to go about starting over. And boy, was he right.
He did so many amazing things, it sounds like. Yeah.
He was amazing. And he was an amazing person, and he was a very, very talented person, and he was brilliant, as well as it related to how to build companies. And he certainly was the cornerstone of our building.
Under Al Bell, he did things like, work with Isaac Hayes to, do the theme music for Shaft, and then he was very smart about getting that up for an Oscar nomination, like making sure that music was played in the markets where people who voted on Oscars were listening, and then got Isaac Hayes to perform at the Oscars even though they said no. He's like, we'll pay for it. We're gonna make sure that we take care of this. Don't even worry about it. We just want him to perform. Stax gets a name, for that track.
Who is the man that would risk his neck for his brother, man?
And then, Stax puts on a huge, massive concert that nearly fills an NFL stadium in LA as you're trying to build an audience on the West Coast. And, as you are really rebuilding again, this deal with CBS happens. And shortly thereafter, Stax has to file for bankruptcy. So what happened in those final years there?
The person that we had the relationship with CBS, that person, as stated in the documentary, was Clive Davis, who did have the vision of the marketability potential of Stax Records. But when they were acquired by someone else, he was let go, as the documentary stated. But up until that point, we didn't have any bankruptcy filing or anything. We were a successful company.
Yeah.
But all businesses have lines of credit, and all big businesses. And lines of credit means that a creditor can say, I want all the money now. But, lines of credit means you've got accounts receivables and those kinds of things. And Stax was a big company. And that's how we were forced into involuntary bankruptcy.
What are some of your favorite memories at Stax? And then two, overall, what do you think is Stax's legacy? Well,
I would simply say that my favorite memory of Stax is that it was, in the respect that all of the young talents that were in that neighborhood that became involved with Stax Records, many of which came out of what we call the South Memphis area, we had no idea where this life was going to take us. And so to live and experience that, and to see that the music still lives on these many, many decades later, gives you the reassurance that even way beyond you, it will live on. And so that is the greatest kind of prideful, emotional, satisfying thing that one could ever aspire for. And Stax has meant that not just for me, but for all of us that were associated with it. And it is a great, 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 great compliment to all of us to realize that the music is appreciated and respected by so many people. And no one, me or no one else associated with Stax that's still around, and those that are now gone, took that ever for granted. We were always emotionally moved with public acceptance.
To wrap up my conversation with David Porter about Stax Records, I asked him for a music recommendation.
As I think about a song that has resonated with me, or that is resonating with me, that simply won't stop resonating with me, the song that comes to mind quite easily is a song by N.E.R.E. The song is called Brown Skin.
Brown skin, you know I love your brown skin.
When you look back on the history of the writing of Isaac Hayes and David Porter, we were writing songs that dealt with thinking they would only be appealing to an audience of folk that looked like us. So we had underground messages in our songs, be it Soul Man or Hold On I'm Comin or I Thank You or Wrap It Up, I'll Take You. There was always multiple meanings inside of the songs. And so this particular song by N.E.R.E. brought back those memories in a real profound way. And the subliminal message from that song, in my opinion, is that it speaks to the pride that one can feel by being who they are, looking like who they are, and being with who they want to be with. And it really is like a motivational kind of thing for people who are chocolate. And that the creative way that the song was created really, really magnifies itself in my mind to think that that's such a beautiful approach lyrically and melodically that Emmy did in creation of that song. And it's one of my all-time favorites. As I mentioned, it also has the multiple meaning to it that resonates with me in a real meaningful way. N.E.R.E. and Brown Skin does that for me.
Brown skin up against my brown skin. Need some every now and then. Oh, yeah. Where are your people from? Maybe Mississippi or an island. Apparently your skin has been kissed by the sun. You make me want a Hershey's kiss. Your licorice.
That was my conversation with David Porter, musician and songwriter of the Stax hits Soul Man and Hold On I'm Comin. He was part of a new documentary out now on HBO and Max called Stax, Soulsville U.S.A. The documentary has been nominated for 2 Emmys. The Emmy Awards are happening on September 15th. That was a deeper listen. Before you go, please take a moment to subscribe to this podcast, rate it, and review it. Those little things go a long way in helping spread the word about this podcast. You can also help financially support this show because it is brought to you from KEXP, a publicly funded station where the majority of our funding comes from listeners. You allow us to do what we do, not big advertising dollars. So think about a financial gift. Think about $6 a month to help support a deeper listen. You can give at kexp.org/deeper. But thanks for taking a deeper listen.